In a battle for the ACC's best shade of orange, the headline of the day was the return of Joe Girard III. The Glen Falls native eclipsed 2,000 career points and led the Tigers in scoring for a 77-68 triumph over his former school. Despite 4 ties and 3 lead changes in the game, the 'Cuse went cold when it counted most. But that's not all we're here to talk about. Syracuse women's basketball is making a serious case for an NCAA tournament bid. It's all things 'Cuse hoops on this special hour-long edition of Orange Press Pass, and it starts right now. Welcome back into the Waverly Avenue studios. I'm Philip Galati, that's Adam, Avin, Sam Reis, making history with the very first all-live hour-long OPP. Boys, great to have you here.
It's great to be here with you, man.
Oh, I'm pumped. Talking an hour of hoops. Let's do this, Phil.
All right, well, we're going to start with the game that just happened, that Clemson went over Syracuse in the JMA Dome. First thoughts, we'll start with you, Adam.
Yeah, my first thought is put this one behind you right away. I mean, just forget about it. And look, they've struggled as of late, and Benny Williams gets released from the team. You know, they're not shooting the ball particularly well, especially from deep. And so there's been these consistent struggles as of late. And I think right now their tournament hopes are slowly dwindling away. They need to just put this game behind them, focus on UNC next week, because that is a win that might be the turning point if they can make the tournament.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I think their hopes of making the tournament are very quickly going away. Very small. I guess you still have hope. But my first thought is that this defense has to get its act together, because it's been a trend over the last few games now. I remember in that BC loss, the Orange let the Eagles shoot 60%. Clemson today shot 61% from the field and 43% from 3. Also, the Tigers scored 48 in the paint. So overall, as a defensive unit, Syracuse just looked out of sorts at time, whether it was slow to close out the perimeter or slow to react to drives into the paint. Joe Girard did some of that today. We'll get to him a little later. And in that second half, Syracuse's offense finally stepped up with 44 points, but their defense couldn't do enough, Phil, to get the job done, and that's what was frustrating today.
Too little, too late.
Exactly.
Wow. All right, so you two are not pulling punches, and we're going to be in for a wild ride. But for those of you at home, let's take a look at the highlights from this game. 77-68 the final. But how did it all happen? 'Cuse was there for most of it. In that battle for the better shade of orange, it's Clemson wearing purple, though, so not quite true to form. Syracuse started on the hot foot. Malik Brown had that 5-by-5 game last time out, making history. Got the first dunk of the game to make it 2-0 SU, but Clemson, the Tigers, weren't hibernating for very long. Jack Clark, good from 3, assisted by Joe Girard III. And then Clemson really started turning things up. They had the height inside. P.J. Hall with the slam to put the Tigers up 11-10. And then enter the Glen Falls man, JG3, Adam. 'Cuse couldn't keep him quiet for very long.
Perfect return for Joe Girard. Gets to come back home and play in front of his hometown crowd. A mix of boos and cheers for Joe. But ultimately, he shot the ball well, and he played the game that the Tigers needed.
JG3 moving the ball as he always does. It was an 18-2 Clemson run just before this. Quadir Copeland two-handed jam. The Orange got some things together before halftime, but it was Chase Hunter beating the buzzer with the layup. 37-24 Tigers on top through 20. In the second half, 'Cuse needed a spark. Sam, it came from JJ Starling.
And he needed to step up for this Orange team. He had 0 points in the first half, bounced back with 16 in the second.
Chris Bell, good from 3. He had a couple clankers off the iron, too. That was one of his few makes. The Orange really could have used a couple more. There's Malik Brown getting posterized in the paint by Chauncey Wiggins against that height coming into effect that we'll talk about later. And then Joe Girard III with 2,000 career points in this one. Make it a 60-60 tie, though. Judah Mintz with the jumper. Syracuse managed to claw their way back from a huge deficit. JJ Starling tried to play some hero ball with a good drive, but in the last 2 minutes, Clemson managed to pull away. Starling looking for more help, trying to extend that Syracuse lead. The Dome crowd ready to cheer for something. And JJ Starling, well, he did what he could, but it didn't last very long. A spin move from JG3, kick out to the corner. Ian Shefflin puts the Tigers on top 67-60 now. And then the most hated man in Syracuse today with the 2,000 career points makes it 73-65. Clemson, one last layup from Chase Hunter, put the final nail in the coffin. 77-68 the final. 'Cuse on the wrong side. So when we take a look at the full screen, well, Joe Girard's back in town. We've talked about that a little bit. We're going to talk about it a little bit more, but what else sticks to you on this full screen, Sam?
I'm going to start with P.J. Hall of Clemson, because you look at that, a double-double for the guard, 15 points, 10 rebounds. He's been their leading scorer throughout the season, but he can also get it done on the boards, and he showed just that today. Tossing 3 blocks. What a performance from him.
Rebounding was a struggle for Syracuse. We'll get to that later. A lot of these things are going to keep coming up throughout our 1 hour show, but there, Chris Bell once again saves the day with some threes late in the second half. He tried to do what he could, but ultimately too little too late for Syracuse. The shooting wasn't there from the jump.
Well, we got to put the guys that get points up there. Justin Taylor, by the way, 0 for 3. Didn't have room for that in the graphic, but we do have room to welcome in our first guest of the afternoon, Steven Sklar, live in the Dome to help break this one down. Steven, thanks for joining us. First question we got to ask you is, in that second half, Syracuse managed to claw their way back after a huge deficit in the first, but then it all went wrong down the stretch. So what was that tipping point for the Orange in the second half?
Yeah, sure. No, listen, the second half, things started to look really good from the 6 to 4 minute mark if you want to really, drill into the weeds of what the game was like. But then after that, it really seemed like they just couldn't get the right shot that they wanted to get. They were making too many mistakes on defense. And, another thing, too, there was a lot of foul trouble. If I look back to a specific moment, Malik Brown had picked up his fourth foul with about 8 minutes remaining in the game. And then in the final 4 minutes, there was a play tied 60-60. Malik Brown defending P.J. Hall, and he kind of just let P.J. Hall work on him a little bit and spin his way into a layup without making any kind of contact. That's as a result of getting yourself into foul trouble, ill-advised foul trouble. And then, of course, talking about shot selection, Judah Mintz, Chris Bell, not the most efficient players today. Everything started to pile up and combust, really.
Steven, I hope we get to see you jump into that club basketball game behind you in the Dome there. Syracuse could have used you today. And speaking of Syracuse, talking about their rebounding in particular, discussed a little bit earlier in the show, but I want to ask you, what are the Orange going to be able to do going forward with Malik Brown being pretty much shorter than all the centers he's faced so far, and the struggles have continued to show for Syracuse?
Yeah, I mean, if they're looking for another player, there's this guy on the club basketball team behind me, number 12. His first name is Hunter. He's really good at getting boards, to be honest with you, so I'm going to try and recruit him after I'm done with this. But the fact of the matter is that in a game against a team like Clemson or in a game against a team like North Carolina, they're just not going to have the height to be able to match up with those kinds of teams, especially without Peter Carey. Now, he's a height advantage for sure, but he doesn't really provide all that much physicality. Malik Brown is good for what he is, and that's a versatile Swiss Army knife kind of guy. He does really good things on the defensive end, of course, when it comes to rebounding and when it comes to steals and when it comes to blocks. But then when they kind of get down on that end and it's just Malik Brown up against another team's much bigger player, they don't have anything that can contend, and that's why they lose a rebounding battle by 17 like you saw today against Clemson.
Steven, it's great to see you, and I'll tell you what, neither Phil or Adam asked about it, so that means it's my responsibility too. I, of course, have to ask about Joe Girard, his long-awaited return to the Dome. For you there in person at the game, just what was the overall reception for JG3's return? Was it, a lot of boos, a mix of boos and cheers? How was that today?
I think it was a little bit calmer than I had expected it to be. Joe Girard, such a polarizing player in his time here. He was a great number 2 scoring option behind Buddy Boeheim for a very long time. And then when he became that number 1 scoring option last season, he sort of became a little bit more hated than maybe he should have. Now, personally, and I'm going to leave this aside, but personally, I always thought he took a few too many shots and the volume was a little bit too much for me. But he was still a very good player. So I thought more students would be booing, sort of like how I would have if I was in the stands. But, most of the students were drowned out by a lot of the people that live in town, that live in Syracuse, come support this team all year round, have for their entire lives. I think for the most part, they drowned out the negative student section that wanted to boo him. That was all pregame. Then once the game started, Joe Girard became number 1 villain. anytime he touched the ball, he had boos cascading down onto him. He could not touch it. He could not sub in or sub out of the game without hearing boos from this entire stadium that you see around me. Now, I know behind me it looks like there aren't that very many people. That's because it's a club basketball game. But when Syracuse men's basketball, the varsity team, was playing, it was about as packed as I've seen this dome all year long. And the boos were very loud. They were very loud. Make no mistake about it.
That's Steven Sklar. Make sure you keep it locked on the CitrusTV Sports X and YouTube accounts for his post-game donut. And, of course, he knows some basketball, so we'll be hearing from him soon. All right, time for our first break on our very first hour-long special. When we come back, time to ask the hard-hitting questions about what went wrong for the Orange today. Stick with us. Welcome back to Orange Press Pass. Philip Galati, Adam, Avin, Sam Reis with you, breaking down a little bit more about exactly what went wrong today. We start with the Glen Falls-size elephant in the room. Sam, you had to ask a question about it. We've got time. We got to talk way more about Joe Girard's impact in this game. And Sam, since you brought it up with Steven, we'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about what you saw from him tonight and just what happened with Syracuse not being able to shut him down.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say it was all that surprising, in all honesty, because you know Girard, just like a lot of Syracuse fans, had this game circled on their calendar and were ready. He was going to be ready for this moment. And it was a bit of a quiet start from him where he didn't take too many shots. But in the end, he ends up being Clemson's leading scorer with 18 points, knocked down 4 of 5 threes. Again, Adam, he didn't shoot the ball a whole lot, but when he did, he was extremely efficient. And Syracuse just really didn't have an answer, particularly when he had those chances from the perimeter. Just didn't close them down quick enough. He made them pay, and I can't say I'm too surprised.
There were some boos for Joe Girard, of course. He left Syracuse after 4 years. I mean, I would expect nothing less, but I do think that this was probably the best return that he could have asked for. From friends in the Dome, we did hear that there were some cheers, so it wasn't all boos, and so it was kind of a mixed reception from the Syracuse fans, but he had a great game today. It was actually everyone else on the Tigers team who was kind of struggling. PJ Hall ended up with a double-double, but for the most part, he wasn't shooting the ball super well. They were dominating in the paint, but the whole team wasn't shooting great from three. JG3, though, alone and by himself, lifted the Tigers to victory today.
I mean, you look at the numbers, and it's right up there with how well he played for Syracuse in that orange jersey. His coach mentioned he's got a little bit of a different shade of orange in his heart now, which I'm sure some of the Syracuse students might not have wanted to hear. But as you mentioned, today, what really stuck out, he had that clutch gene. 4 of 5 from deep. Even though he was a great scorer for Syracuse, sometimes it felt like in the big moments he was absent. That just wasn't the case today.
You know, some Syracuse fans might have been upset at the shots that he was taking. A little too much volume, like Steven mentioned a little bit earlier, right? So, some shots that maybe were the best, maybe a little bit contested for his size and where he was on the court, a little too deep of a three. But you know, today he showed up and he took some open shots and was knocking down those threes. Really important.
All right, well, let's move back to Syracuse basketball. We got to talk a little bit about the backcourt because, frankly, they were MIA today. And we know how good Judah Mintz is. Everybody in the NCAA knows how good Judah Mintz is. J.J. Starling, as a pair with him, is very good. On his own, there's been questions. He put up 26 against the Wolfpack when Judah went 14 of 18 from the charity stripe. But today, it seemed like the pairing together just didn't show up, Adam.
It's been a struggle as of late, like we've talked about. Judah and JJ, that was the backcourt that we were very excited about coming in, potentially even the most talented ACC backcourt, in the conference. And so I think when you look at what JJ's done, he's finally started to shoot the ball like we've finally hoped he would. He's been scoring very efficiently, but then Judah has kind of taken a back seat, or at least not shooting the ball as well as we would have liked, and seeing them play together more often. And so I think one of them is stepping up, the other one is kind of declining. They need to play together, and that is where Syracuse would have stood out if they would have been winning more games at this point late in the season, hopefully for a tournament push. And want to see them two do it together.
Right, and that's the key. When those two are linking up together and playing well as a duo, at certain points, we've seen spurts of it in games over the last few weeks, but not with enough consistency, and today was a great example of that just not happening. We see the total stat line for both Mintz and Starling, throw Copeland in there as well, but it was a tale of two halves for both of those two-star players for the Orange, where Starling didn't have a point in that first half, finally showed up in the second half, but then Mintz in the final 20 minutes really went quiet, just making 2 shots, only got to the line once. We know he loves drawing that contact, a very frustrating second half for him. So those two just didn't quite seem to be clicking today. That was a big reason why Syracuse couldn't get it going offensively.
I mean, personally, it's always interesting to see Judah Mintz pull up from 3, because that's really not his game.
No.
But Adam, to your credit, I mean, again, tale of two halves, but I want to hear your take on this.
I got to say, I have to be a little bit more critical when it comes to Judah, because we know what he can do. We saw the raw talent from him last year, and we thought that if he comes back this year for a sophomore season, that he would be able to improve and build on that. But unfortunately, that hasn't been the case. When I think of the best moments from this season so far, yes, Judah had that great 33-point performance against LSU earlier in the season. But the rest, besides Quadir's buzzer beater against Miami, it's been a lot of JJ, a lot of clutch shots, and a lot of good moments. The energy that he brings, Judah's energy hasn't been there. He's kind of foul baiting almost a lot of the time. He's trying to get for the foul. He's not scoring as efficiently. Getting to the line is what he wants to do most right now. Syracuse cannot play offense that way. They got to wrap it up.
That's scathing. That's scathing.
He's being honest, but he's still a great player. It doesn't take anything away from him.
I see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Well, let's pivot a little bit from the offense to the defense, because the defense in this game for Syracuse was just poor. So, Sam, break us down a little bit of the tale of the tape. You know ball. Where did it all go wrong?
Well, for me, it depends. No matter what, whether they're playing the man-to-man or zone, honestly, it doesn't matter that much to me, because I know they were criticized a lot in that Louisville game for playing that zone where Louisville scored a bunch of points. But even in that man-to-man defense, in some stages today, there's still some miscommunication off the ball, whether Clemson's setting a screen that sometimes throws off complete possessions for Syracuse, where someone's not picking up their man in time, and when you got a guy on the other side like Joe Girard who can knock down the 3, or a guy like PJ Hall who can drive inside, get it done in the paint, I mean, it's not a recipe for success, and Syracuse was struggling both on that perimeter and in the paint, just late to react a lot of the time, Adam.
Yeah, when we talk about the defense specifically, I think it pairs very well when we're talking about the backcourt with Judah and JJ.
True.
For example, we recognized that zone last year, the scheme that Jim Boeheim played for 47 straight years, right? And so Judah comes into that system, and what is he best at? It's getting steals, it's forcing turnovers, right. And so right when the ball crosses half court, Phil, he is going and trying to chase the ball, trying to jump and pick the ball off like in football and score on the other end. And so when that happens and an offensive player just completely blows by Judah Mintz, then another defender has to step up like a JJ or maybe a Quadir step up and guard, and then they're back in zone and all the players are off their mans and switching around. So they're kind of in this 2-3 man defense. It's a little
confusing.
Bit weird, but it's partly due to the fact that they're being a little bit too aggressive. Sometimes it's okay to get back and get set, get a rebound, and then score on the other end.
I also think that mixture of both the zone and man has almost made things even more confusing and have made them feel more out of sorts. I mean, look at these stats. They've allowed, I'm not great at math, but here we go. The last 4 games, their opponent has shot over 53%. I mean, that can't happen.
Right. You're good at reading, maybe not at math.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't do the math.
Anytime you see a 60, right, in that column, that's a worrying
multiple
sign.
times.
Pretty good.
Multiple times. Always good with Syracuse basketball playing defense. But on that topic, we want to talk about one thing specifically about the defensive game, especially in this game. It was the rebounding, or honestly, lack thereof. We touched on a little bit about the height from some of the Tigers. Malik Brown especially getting beat in the paint. Those points off of turnovers as well. That's a big thing for Syracuse. Wasn't as big of a source of scoring today. So Adam, tell us a little bit about that discrepancy, what you saw.
Malik Brown is a little bit shorter, and that's not a knock on him. It hurts. You don't have Benny Williams now to help with depth off the bench, even though he's not the biggest or tallest guy. I mean, he was aggressive, and he would, leap above everyone else to go and grab those boards. Doesn't help now that you have Peter Carey out. Munir Hima plays very limited minutes, so there is struggle at the 5. And with Malik Brown being the tallest guy, he's doing it all, or at least as much as he can. And unfortunately, if they're going up against guys who are 3, 4, 5 inches taller than him, it's going to be a struggle on the rebounding.
Yeah, we're going to get into Brown a little bit later, and I love the way he plays. I love his work ethic. He does as much as he can on the boards, but there's only so much one guy can do. That is a little undersized, to be that, quote-unquote center, which he really isn't. So that's the issue for Syracuse. Just not enough size there, as you mentioned. And you look at today, they were out-rebounded 41-24. Even on Wednesday, yes, they beat Louisville, but they only had 21 rebounds in that game, which was their fewest since 2015. So this is, and we're seeing the rebound margin right on cue here. This has been a constant issue, and it's very concerning at this point of the season, Phil.
I mean, 41-24 just jumps off the page for me, but also all of those L's, right? I mean, they can do things with the basketball. They can score points. They can win games without winning the rebound battle. But when it's that big of a discrepancy, I mean, surely it's got to be a talking point, right?
Right. Points off those rebounds are just, that is what's been the biggest difference. When Syracuse, is trying to fight for all those rebounds, they're clearly not tall enough. They might not even get the board or have a chance to. Then it leaves someone else wide open. The team is just going to fly past them because the defense isn't set because of the dysfunction on defense.
Yeah, and especially against, better teams in the ACC. I know we have North Carolina coming up, so you can get away with it against Louisville, but you're not going to get away with that against those ranked teams, Phil.
All right, so without further ado, it's time now to award the Orange Press Pass Player of the Game Award. And Orange fans, this one's going to sting. JG3 was almost unstoppable from three-point range and reached the 2K mark in career scoring tonight against his former team. Gerard is still third in all-time three-pointers made in a Syracuse jersey, and true to ironic fashion, his three-point shooting this season is sitting right at 44%. With double-digit points in his last 8 games, the former Syracuse man shows no signs of slowing. And with that, we get back to the better shade of orange. OPP rolling on after the break with a brand new game we've got on the other side of the break. And Q's is going to the cinema. I hope you'll join us in a little bit.
Women are bad with money.
That's what the world's been saying for centuries. But now,
we've got something to say.
Save it. Save the old-fashioned advice, the empty excuses.
It's all worthless, unlike us.
To our fellow females, it is time to save ourselves by saving our money.
Contributing to our futures, investing in our independence.
Until we're no longer 80%
more likely than men to live in poverty in retirement.
So again, we say to that,
Save it. The falsehoods, the feelings of fault. Then the funds.
learn how to save for your retirement at wesaysaveit.org.
Welcome back to Orange Press Pass. Sam Reis, Avin, Philip Galati with you, and it's time to play a little game. Y'all ready for a Saturday night showing?
Yeah. Do we have our OP popcorn?
You stole my joke, man.
Dang it.
You stole my joke. I was about to say, all right, it's time to grab the OP popcorn, head to the cinema. Forget it. Anyways, we're playing a game where I'm going to give these guys a Syracuse basketball player, and based on how they've been playing, you're going to answer with a movie title that describes your thoughts. Simple enough?
Sounds good.
All right, well, we got to start with the main man, number 3, Judah Mintz. If you could describe his game in a movie title, Adam, what would it be?
This is one of my favorite movies of all time, and I think it describes Judah perfectly. I'm going with The Disaster Artist. Why? Because sometimes when he plays, it's a little bit dysfunctional, right? We're talking about he plays for the foul, he's trying to go to the free throw line, he's not scoring as efficiently as he did last year, but sometimes when he makes those shots, you think, oh my God, he's unbelievable, right? He's the most talented player on this team. There's no doubt about it. And when he shows up, he shows up. I mean, Judah Mintz can do it all. He makes some really tough shots sometimes, but at the end of the day, we haven't seen it so much, especially in this stretch over the last month where Syracuse needs to win some games to make an NCAA tournament push. But I think Judah right now, he's a disaster artist for this team.
All right, fair enough. And you know, I'm gonna take the angle here. I'm gonna go with Mission Impossible for my movie. Okay. The reason I say that is because, again, we all know how talented Mintz is, and he knows that, and that's why we've seen some great performances from him at times. But when the surrounding cast doesn't step up, which has been too much of the time this season, he tries to do a little too much, whether that's, you know, playing hero ball in a variety of ways. You know, sometimes making poor decisions, sometimes relying on getting that contact a little too much, and when the calls don't go his way, that could lead to some frustration and inefficiencies. So at the end of the day, what Mintz is trying to do when he locks in and tries to play that hero ball when other teammates aren't stepping up, that's not going to work, and we've seen that multiple times this season, so that's why I'm going with Mission Impossible for Judah Mintzville.
All right, I'm going to combine both your titles in a horror movie called Ready or Not. If you've never seen it, it's fantastic. Love horror movies. I'm so sorry, Mom. I know I wasn't allowed to watch them growing up. But Ready or Not really describes Judah Mintz's play because we know his star quality. We've talked about how good he can be, especially in those clutch moments, but then sometimes the candle just goes out, right? Very hit or miss kind of guy. Is he ready for the big leagues? Is he ready to take this team to the NCAA tournament? Maybe the ACC tournament? NIT? We don't know. So let's move on to another player on Syracuse basketball. We'll talk about Justin Taylor, one of the core 5 for head coach Adrian Autry, who has been interesting to watch this season. Sam, we'll go with you first. Give us a movie title.
Interesting is one way to put it. I would say disappointing. And I'm going with the movie title. I'm going with the movie Toy Story 2. Now hear me out here.
All right, this is going to be good.
I have to do some explaining. You know, I'm not a big movie guy, but this is obviously a movie I'm very familiar with. And you know how when Andy gets home, he gets home and all of the toys they freeze up and go back to being toys, and we know how it goes. But I just have to explain for those who might be living under a rock like myself at times with movies. And that's J.J. Taylor. That's Justin Taylor. There we go. I'm combining people now. Justin Taylor. I mean, when he gets out on the floor when the game starts, he just can't he can't do anything in my opinion. And then you look at the stats and they tell you just as much, Adam. You look at today. I can't even say he's inefficient shooting the ball because he barely shoots the ball. Only shot it 3 times today, 0 points. That has been his stat line way too much. He just freezes up when he gets on the court and can't get the job done no matter what you ask him to do on the offensive side. So that's how it all connects to Toy Story 2 when all is said and done, Adam.
Love Toy Story 2. That's a great pick. You had some struggles there for a little bit, but it ended up being really good. We got there. I'm going with Thunderstruck. Why Thunderstruck? If you don't know that movie, that's a movie where Kevin Durant switches basketball talent with a random local high schooler who stinks at basketball. And then Kevin Durant loses his ability to shoot the basketball. Why is that, Justin Taylor? You mentioned it, Sam, because not only is he not shooting the ball, but when he does shoot, it's brick after brick after brick. And unfortunately, we saw it from him last year, where sometimes when they played against other top opponents like teams in the ACC, he fell a little bit short. But it shows the trust that Adrian Autry still has in him with Benny Williams now out. He's sticking with Justin Taylor at the 4, a big body to try and do some more on the boards, but the shooting just hasn't been there, and that's where the work needs to be done.
Yeah, Sam used a lot of words I really liked. He's going cold on offense. He freezes up. It's really warm this week for some reason. We're going to turn the temperature back down. I'm going with Ice Age. Maybe even Continental Drift, because some of his shots could really end up in Antarctica. But this guy has just been ice cold. Sam, you mentioned 0 for 3 today. In 2024, I think I did the math right.
Okay.
11 of 42.
It's not good percentage-wise. I don't think.
Again, not the greatest for a Division I Power 5 basketball player. Let's move on to our final player in the game, Malik Brown, number 1 on this team. Number one in our hearts sometimes. But Sam, I'm going to go with you. Give us a Q's of the Cinema title for how he's been playing this year.
Yeah, this one's easy for me. It's Fast and Furious for Malik Brown. I mean, you know, he's like Vin Diesel out there. He's fast and furious at both ends of the floor. I mean, Phil, you mentioned earlier his 5x5 game where he was doing everything against Louisville, the first player to have that stat line this season in Division I basketball. And then today, he also had a pretty efficient day. 9 points, 8 rebounds, and 4 steals. Game in, game out, he makes a big impact at both ends. I love his work ethic. He played all but 4 minutes today. He can block you, strip, you know, come away with a steal at one end, and then also crashing the boards. We mentioned it earlier. He's that main guy getting the rebound. So I just love his intensity at both ends of the floor, getting it done. That's why I'm going with Fast and Furious here for one of my favorite players on Syracuse.
Malik Brown is high flying. He's crashing the boards. That's why I'm going with Iron Man, because Iron Man is tough. All right, he has to do it all, right? He's the leader of that team when he's out there on the floor, specifically anchoring the defense, right? We're talking about a player who is asked to be that 5, to be the anchor down there in the paint. And I think right now with what Malik can do, especially what he's shown that he can do when he goes 5x5, you know, he's doing it all, literally steals, blocks, points, rebounds, assists, everything. You know, he's Iron Man. He's leading the team right now, and he's the only one really that's playing consistently for the Orange.
Those are better than mine. All right, this is going to sound mean at first, but going with Stuart Little. Hear me out. Okay, hear me out. Today,
the mouse?
What? The mouse. Today he was a little bit short stack. You know what I mean? PJ Hall. There's not much you're gonna do against that height. Okay, but it seemed like Quadir Copeland was getting up higher.
What's wrong with short people? Come on.
Nothing at all. But to be fair, Stuart Little also was a glue guy for his family, right? Brought the whole house together. Malik Brown is kind of a unanimous glue guy for this team. You know, it's a nice sentiment, right?
Wasn't sure where you were going, but it ended up.
Yeah, Iron Man was better anyways. All right, well, this is usually where we say goodbye on Orange Press Pass, but not today. We're making history with our very first hour show. So when we come back from this break, we're going to talk Q's women's hoops. Coach Felicia Getjack and company making a charge toward the top of the ACC standings, plus a special guest live in studio later on. You won't want to miss it.
Jason, let's go see your room.
What do you think? We kept it a little spare, so you can decorate it how you like.
Dinner! Go?
Excellent. Yeah, I saw you guys out there. We're the family. Yeah! Oh, I thought you were on my team.
Orange Press Pass rolling along. Philip Galati, joined by Adam, Avin, and Sam Reis. And we're switching things up, talking some Syracuse women's hoops. And we're going to start with their last contest. Gentlemen, Your first thoughts on the Thursday 62-59 win over Georgia Tech for Syracuse?
I've just been loving what I'm seeing right now from this Orange team. They really are keeping the ball rolling. They're winning these must-win games. Obviously, they've struggled against some other top ACC opponents, but honestly, for most of those games, they've stayed in them. It's late when they start missing shots. They haven't been shooting the ball well, but Deasia Fair has been a superstar for this team, and the Orange needed to get that win against the Yellow Jackets last week.
They did, and I'll give them credit for pulling out that win in a close game down to the wire. The offense wasn't really where I think they wanted it to be. Honestly, it was the bench that stepped up a lot. Deasia Fair was the only double-digit scorer that started this game, but a lot of credit has to be given to the defense of Syracuse because this was the first game they've scored fewer than 70 points that they've won all season. So they learned how to win in a different manner than usual. So I give them credit.
Important come tournament time.
Absolutely, yeah.
And tournament time is a real possibility because this team finds a way to win a lot of close games. And honestly, we'd be remiss if we didn't show you the tail of the tape from this one. So let's wind the clock back and take you through a back-and-forth affair. Syracuse and Georgia Tech facing off in the Dome in the Play for K jerseys. Syracuse got the scoring started with who else but, of course, the Rochester native Deasia Fair getting open as she so often does from deep, and pretty much every time she pulls up from deep, it's good too. Syracuse got out to a hot start, but Kara Dunn had other things to say for the Yellow Jackets. She was shooting very well from deep as well, make that 14-11 GT, who would take the lead at the end of the first quarter, but then enter someone who Sam Hughes had missed. That's Isabel Verjao.
Yeah, she hadn't played since early December. She missed 14 games. You wouldn't have known it based on the way she played off the bench on Thursday.
Georgia Tech still rolling along, took a 6-point lead, 29-23, with a couple minutes to go until halftime. Alyssa Latham did what she could, but it was Yellow Jackets on top after 20 minutes into the third quarter, and the scoring came with the Thunder from down under. Adam, Georgia Woolley.
Georgia Woolley missed a couple games earlier this season, was struggling after she returned from her injury, but she has been a huge spark in that starting lineup next to Deasia Fair. She has been on a roll shooting the ball, and she has been really good.
A 1-point contest headed into the fourth and final frame. SU up by 1. It was Caleb Blackshear in the paint, tying things up at 50 apiece. Then with 4 minutes to go, Verjao looking for the basket, gets it up off the glass and the foul too. Tough take for her, tied up at 53 again. 3 minutes to go. Georgia Woolley rips one away. Deasia Fair picks it up. She sees her options, has space for the 3-point jumper, and splash. You already know it's good from number 2. Syracuse with a slight lead, 60-59, into the last 10 seconds of the game. The Yellow Jackets looking for a last-second 3 off the iron, still alive. The visitors got the rebound, somehow able to kick it out, and it was no good. Syracuse holds on for another nail-biter, 62-59 the final. Whew. All right, let's catch our breath. Sam, tell us what you saw.
Yeah, I mean, my heart was racing just going through the highlights, never mind watching that game live. You know, I saw a Syracuse team that really had a gutsy performance. I mean, that was mayhem at the end. You just saw it in the highlights with the Georgia Tech player stepping on the line on that 3-point attempt. This could have easily been an overtime game, but I quickly touched on it earlier. It was the likes of Alyssa Latham and Isabel Verjao off the bench who combined for 25 points and 15 rebounds. Those two stepping up is what really made the difference on offense for a Syracuse team that had its starters struggle a bit at times.
Right, Verjao coming back after a month missed, and she's been a spark off the bench in that first game, hopes to continue that. It's that depth that is super important for this Orange team so that they can have those different rotations and play strong come tournament time.
So we got to talk a little bit about the players that make this possible. Let's focus on Deasia Fair for a little bit. We've talked about her a lot. Everybody knows her name. She was kind of an unknown at Buffalo, but that's not the case anymore. So Adam, if there's one thing about her game that sticks out to you, what would it be and why?
She just plays the right way, and it's super important when they're in these tough situations against some more difficult opponents. Not only is she shooting the ball incredibly efficiently, she had 38 points against BC the other week, but most of the time, Deasia Fair knows when to make the right play when it's late in the game, whether that's on defense. We saw it in the highlights. Georgia Woolley creates a turnover, she picks it up, goes on the other end, hits a 3, right? She knows the right shots to take, and very often than not, she's hitting her shots almost every single time. That's the most impressive part to me. She plays the right way, and she's helping the Orange a lot, especially these two seasons.
She's just absolutely remarkable, isn't she? And as much as her 3-point shooting impresses me a lot, At times, I also just marvel at her ball handling skills when she's driving into the lane, because when she takes someone on, you see right here the scoring leader. She just continues to climb up that list. When she takes someone on in an ISO situation, I'm taking her most of the time, and she's what, 5'5", I believe. You sometimes forget that based on how good of a dribbler she is, the ability to turn on the dime, make a move past a defender. She's remarkable.
That's why she's 6th all time in NCAA scoring too.
Oh yeah.
Just behind names like Brittany Griner and Caitlin Clark, and not very far off from that top 5 either. So let's pivot from the grad student to a younger part of Syracuse's core, a rising star on the team, freshman Alyssa Latham. Sam, you're big on her play.
I am. You know, she's been a little inconsistent throughout the season, but we also have to remember that she is a freshman at the end of the day. She had a lot of hype coming into the season, understandably so, a highly touted recruit that Coach FLJ got, and she had, you know, a couple of 20-point performances early on in the campaign. She's cooled down a little bit in terms of production scoring the ball, but she does still have that ability to make an impact off the bench with that mid-range game down low in the paint. You know, she had double-digit scoring against Georgia Tech on Thursday, and then she's also an important rebounder for this team. She's picked it up as of late. She had 10 against BC, 8 against Georgia Tech. So her presence on the boards goes a long way for this team that can be undersized. Now with Varish out back, it will help a little bit, but can be undersized.
Alyssa Latham is a freshman that's starting for a Power 5 team playing over 30 minutes a game.
Right.
And so she is using a lot of her energy. She is, you know, has been the main 5 for this Orange team. And now with Varish coming back, maybe there's a switch there, I don't know. But over the last 8 games, she's had games where she scored 6, 0, 8, 2, 2, and 7. If a player is playing 30 minutes a game, that is a player that needs to score the basketball efficiently and help her team. So far, Alyssa Latham hasn't done that recently. I hope she can come back to it. She did have a good game against Yellow Jackets, 12 points.
Well, despite some up and down games, she's got the confidence from the woman in charge, head coach Felicia Leggett-Jack. We got to talk about her, the one and only female athlete on the Hill to have her jersey retired. Hopefully we get a couple more soon, SU. But not only does she have a great basketball mind, just watching some of the clips you see of the locker rooms and the press conferences, stuff on X and on YouTube, she can just motivate anybody to run through a brick wall.
Felicia Leggett-Jack was the perfect person to take over this women's basketball program. It is a team that has been through a lot. She brought in her own players that follow her from Buffalo, where she had some success there, and to, you know, start a lower school, come here to Syracuse, kind of be at her alma mater, where the city she grew up in. It has been amazing to watch. And in year 2, doing what they're doing, 19-4, Sam, it has been over expectations, and I have loved watching every second of it.
Yeah, sometimes you forget it's only year 2 in the Felicia Leggett-Jack era, because when she took over just a couple of seasons ago, this program wasn't in a good state. And there were a lot of question marks, and she makes a big stride in year 1, bringing them to the NIT. They were a bubble team in that conversation of the NCAA tournament, and now this year, they're absolutely a tournament team that have made even more strides, just a great presence, and you can tell everyone's bought in within the team, Phil.
Everyone is buying in, so we're going to need an expert to talk a little bit more about this Syracuse women's hoops team. So when we come back from the break, we're going to welcome our very own Della Piana into the studio, our CitrusTV Syracuse women's basketball beat reporter. You don't want to miss it. Stick with us.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back to Orange Press Pass. A little bit of a crowded desk going on here, guys. That's Sam Reis, Andrew Della, Piana, Philip Galati, and Adam Avin doing our little Inside the NBA spoof here. We're talking Syracuse women's hoops. Should we get started?
Let's dance. Come on.
I like being over here too. I like seeing Andrew.
Oh,
there.
Adam, come on. That's too nice of you.
Andrew, so.
Yeah, it's the Massachusetts group. We're on this side.
All right, we got to start talking about the next opponent for Syracuse, and that's Louisville. This is a tough Cards team. We start first with their last game out, an upset over Notre Dame. Going to start with you, Andrew, since you're our resident expert. What did you see in that game?
Well, the Cardinals beating a very good Notre Dame team, 73-66. A home game taking down a top 15 opponent, number 12 Notre Dame. They held Notre Dame under 70 points for just the third time this season. Very impressive on that part, but offensively for the Cards, it's a team that has a career-high score right now in Nyla Harris, 19 points against Notre Dame. This offense was just really efficient in that victory.
That's really what stood out to me in this game. That three-point shooting, which really turned out to be the difference. The Cardinals went nearly 40% from downtown, while the Irish were very quiet, just 11% from deep. If Louisville can shoot like that against Syracuse come Sunday, the Orange could have their hands full.
We got to talk a little bit about what this matchup is going to look like now for Syracuse. We talked a little bit about how Louisville is going to be a tough task. I mean, everything in the ACC is, right? So, Adam, as you look ahead to this next game for Syracuse, what really stands out on paper about this matchup?
What happened last time was that Syracuse shot the ball incredibly poorly. And it's because they were shooting a lot from three. They actually shot better from three than they did overall, and I think that was struggle. They weren't hitting their shots. Defense has been a particular issue for this team late in games when it gets really close, but I do think that if Syracuse can hit their shots like they did not do last time, hopefully the game will be closer and Syracuse will have a shot against a really good Louisville team.
Well, versatility, talked about it when you came on camera last block, is that it can't just be the Deasia Fair show, right? Yeah, she poured in 28 points, led the team in scoring, but the supporting cast has to be there. You guys touched on it with Isabel Varejao, but SU led 21-14 after the first quarter, then got outscored 26-13 in that second frame. So the other three quarters of the game have to be as important as you take care of those first 10 minutes.
So talk to us, Andrew, a little bit about the story of Isabel Varejao. We mentioned her briefly in the highs, but you're our expert, of course.
She has been fantastic in her one game back so far. Missed 2 months due to an undisclosed injury. Didn't play since Northwestern back on December 4th, but poured in 13 points, tied her season high, also poured in 7 rebounds on the defensive end. Really important for her, and to add fuel to the fire, had the game-winning bucket within 2 minutes left. So she really did it all in that game. And posting up on the low block, she felt comfortable. And after the game, she said she's playing more free. She's playing a lot more loose. She credited that to assistant coach Sue Lugwood, who got the hard hat of the game. Varejao won it from Coach Felicia Legetjak and gave that over to her. So this team is really unifying right now, and that starts with Isabel Varejao down low.
Our women's team right now playing in pink for breast cancer awareness. That's why I got my pink tie on right now. But we talked about it a little bit. Isabel Varejao comes back helping maybe Alyssa Latham and Kyra Wood, who have been struggling specifically when it comes to scoring the basketball. Rebounds are still there, but when they're not scoring, the team is going to fall back behind, and this team does not play particularly great when they have a deficit, although they have had some really exciting comebacks this year.
They have 18 Florida State, 19 Clemson. Right. Cardiac Hughes is alive and well here in the 315.
It's a perfect moniker. And we're just about at the end of time here for the four of us. I wish we could do this more often.
Oh, my, of course.
This is fun.
Yeah,
this is fun. Somehow all of us fit in the shot. It's impressive. Let's start with Sam. I know you're ready to go. Give us your keys to the game for this Syracuse-Louisville matchup.
Well, I know you guys just briefly talked about that last meeting between these teams, which was only 10 days ago, actually. Yeah. So it is a quick turnaround, with these teams meeting again, this time at the Dome. One thing that I want to mention from that last game was how bad Syracuse was at the line. They were 11 for 23 in that game against the Cardinals. So they missed 12 free throws. They lost by 12 in that game. I know that's something simple, but against a talented, ranked opponent in Louisville, you got to knock down those shots at the charity stripe, and they'll certainly be in this game.
Yeah, let's talk some keys to the game real quick. It starts on the defensive end. Rebound, 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 and rebound some more. Syracuse is one of the best rebounding teams in the country, at top 15, at that number 15 spot. So taking care of the defensive glass, something that FLJ has really preached in her time here at SU. And then, of course, You can't have Louisville shoot 50% from the field. They're one of the best shooting teams in the conference at 50% right now from inside the three-point line. Defensively, you have to lock down and not let Nyla Harris go off like she did last time.
I mentioned it before with De'Asia Farrow. She always plays the right way, and I think that's what most impressive about her. I think the rest of the team needs to follow De'Asia Farrow's lead, score some buckets, and hopefully they have a shot and shoot the ball better than they did last time.
A lot to look forward to tomorrow. Make sure you stay locked on this guy's X account and, of course, the CitrusTV Sports account as well. Andrew, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, guys.
All right, one more break for you, and then we come back. We're going to wrap up shop here on the very first hour-long Orange Press Pass. Don't go anywhere.
Meet Norm. He lives with anxiety, but with the help of this latest innovation from Be Normal, he can be normal, just like everyone else. With the swipe of a finger, you can project happiness, confidence, machismo. Why settle for being real when you can be normal? The Normal Maker, new from Be Normal. This item doesn't really work because there's no such thing as normal. We're all different. What we like, how our brains work. In fact, 1 in 5 of us live with mental illness. Don't filter who you are. Start by talking to someone you trust. And remember, there is no normal.
Saying hi one last time here on Orange Press Pass. Philip Galati, joined by Adam, Avin, and Sam Reis. We're going to take you through the highlights of the game that just happened. Just one more time, Clemson and Syracuse breaking everything down about that 77-68 loss. And guys, let's talk a little bit less about how each shot happened and how the story of the game went overall. Adam, at first, it was back and forth, and then there was an 18-2 run from Clemson.
Those are those defensive lapses that we've been talking about today, right? Malik Brown struggles doing it all, getting those rebounds, and then the team, there's that dysfunction. Are they playing zone? Are they playing man? What is Coach Autry yelling from the sidelines? And then P.J. Hall right there, you see it with the slam, just makes it look too easy, and that was a theme throughout that first half.
Joe Girard as well, making his presence known. We'll talk about him in a little bit. But Sam, you've got something you want to say. I know.
Well, no, I was just going to, piggyback off of Adam saying as much as the defense struggled in spurts during that first half, they also had some offensive inconsistencies where I believe they went 1 for 11 for a spell. But, Phil, in that second half, all of a sudden the Orange started to click again, and this was a game all of a sudden once more.
It was Chase Hunter beating the buzzer at the end of that first half, 37-24. And then in the second half, as you mentioned, Sam, Syracuse finally starting to see things click. Chris Bell had a couple threes. He looked better when he was driving. J.J. Starling good from deep. And then, of course, Chris Bell, he takes so many three-point shots. He's going to make one eventually. He's shot well from deep so far this season. Sam, today was a different story.
It was. At times, I know Chris Bell finished with, 16 points, but he drove me crazy at times. I mean, the other day, yes, he was lights out against Louisville from downtown, but that almost gives him too much confidence at times when he's on a roll from deep, where then today he was taking too many and missing shots. He clanked one off the side of the backboard once, for crying out loud.
Chris Bell's the guy where in the clutch and they need a bucket, they're going to go to him because you know that he is one of the best shooters on this team, if not the best. I remember Jim Boeheim calling him maybe the best shooter that he's ever coached, right? That's an actual Jim Boeheim quote. And so Chris Bell, he was taking a lot of clutch shots today, but nothing more clutch than that J.J. Starling step back.
And this was tied late on with 3.5 minutes to go. It was 60-60. And then Ian Shefflin made that three-pointer assisted by guess who, JG3, to make it 67-60 Clemson. And then, of course, the history maker for the Glens Falls man, 2,000 career points, still on the leaderboard for three-pointers made in Syracuse history. And this Chase Hunter layup was the final dagger, 77-68, the final. And now as we talk about the rest of the NCAA, we've talked a lot about Syracuse and Clemson. Let's expand our horizons a little bit. We've got some other scores to talk about in college basketball as March draws near. Joe Lunardi, the bracketology master, said there's about 4.5 spots for ACC teams. But as we look at other teams in the NCAA. Boys, I'm curious, what sticks out to you? Sam, we'll start with you.
Well, I'm a big Big 12 fan, especially this season where the conference is just wide open in terms of how many talented teams there are, and there's not much discrepancy between the squads. You see Iowa State getting a win earlier, you expect that, and then the game of the day, in my opinion, coming up very shortly between Baylor and Kansas. I like the Jayhawks, but that's a Baylor team that if they're going to spring an upset on the road at Kansas, they're the team to do it in that conference.
Well, look, the game that I'm looking at is that North Carolina-Miami game. Why is that game important? North Carolina, the #3 team in the country, one of the best there is, with a few star players who Syracuse gets to face on Tuesday. But North Carolina just lost to Clemson, who just beat Syracuse. Clemson might be bidding for that NCAA tournament spot. Very few, right? We're talking about 4.5 spots from Joe Lunardi. Maybe Syracuse gets that half spot filled. But I don't know.
That's a good one.
But North Carolina is obviously a storied program that we don't expect to lose in these close games against a really struggling Miami team. That is an ACC matchup that stands out to me.
Well, if Syracuse is going to get a spot, you're going to have to tune in to the next OPP. To our knowledge, I don't think it'll be an hour-long show, but it's still going to be one that you won't want to miss. Syracuse basketball doing their best against a team that really kind of walloped them. 103-67 was the first score the first time these two teams played. This time around, maybe a different story, Adam? Probably not. What do you think?
I don't know if it's going to be a different story. I'm pretty confident that the Tar Heels are going to be able to get the job done with how the Orange have struggled as of late. But look, that game was on the road. This time, it is at home for Syracuse. And so they have the Loud House with them. The fans are going to be behind them. Armando Bacot is not the most favorite opponent of the Orange fans. We all know that after how he worked on Jesse Edwards last year,
right.
Our good old friend Jesse Edwards. But this time, there is some struggle at center, and I don't know if Malik Brown, we've been talking about him all day, will be able to handle Armando Bacot and everything that UNC can do in the paint.
And you do bring up that this time it's, of course, in the Dome after that walloping down, in Chapel Hill. And we do have to keep in mind that last year when these two teams met at the Dome, I remember that game. It was actually a very close game, which UNC came out on top. They were the big favorites, similar to this game. But it was very close. I just don't see that happening this time around.
Last year they had Caleb Love. He transferred to Arizona. This time RJ Davis has been the guy, maybe the best guard in the country, probably going for ACC Player of the Year. That is how good RJ Davis has been. They shoot the ball very efficiently. You see it right up there. 35% from three. That's not great, but 45% overall. They take a lot of shots, averaging over 80 points a game. That is a Tar Heels team you need to put pressure on defense. They're really hard to stop.
I mean, I think the big thing that's going to be a factor in this one that we don't have on the graphic is the height difference. We talked about Armando Bacot, and especially Malik Brown's performance today, which left room for improvement defensively in the paint. Syracuse gonna have a tough time against them. They know that, but you've played this team once. You've had all season to work on tape. You're moving some players around. Hopefully, they have a solution for that. Because if not, it's gonna be a long night.
Some Justin Taylor threes, maybe. Justin Taylor threes next game. That could help Syracuse.
Are they going to go in?
I think they're going to go in, he says. Yeah, I hope so. Yeah. Great. That would help put some points on the board, I think.
Yeah, 11 for 42 in 2024. Let's give him more threes. I don't know about that. All right, well, that's my final thought on him.
On the team,
But yeah, that's an even worse idea. Let's get some better things going here. Let's do final thoughts from this specific game. Syracuse, Clemson. Adam, we'll start with you. Your last takeaway for everybody at home.
Hey, I'm going to take a page out of our friend Andrew's book, who just joined us. He said rebound, rebound, rebound. I'm saying defense, defense, defense. That is my final thought right there. Because we've been talking about, I can't harp on this enough, the defense just hasn't been there. And yes, we've been talking about Malik Brown, but like I mentioned, sometimes we don't know if they're playing zone. Sometimes we don't know if they're playing man. Coach Autry has been switching a lot of things up. Against Louisville, they were running something different that they were running against BC, then they were running against Georgia Tech, then they were running today against Clemson. And so JG3 obviously knows a little bit. He was probably maybe familiar with how Syracuse was playing or going to try and play against him just because of how well he shoots the ball. And boy, did Clemson shoot the ball well today, especially in the paint. So when we're talking about down low, especially against a guy like Armando Bacot who can put some pressure on Malik Brown, put him in the post a little bit. I think it is going to be a pretty physical game down in the paint. We've seen Malik Brown get into foul trouble, and I just think to stay out of it, they got to get set on defense, leave the dysfunction behind them in the past, and play some strong defense, put some pressure on those really good UNC shooters.
Right, the defensive miscues and the rebounding discrepancies as of late for Syracuse is a massive concern of mine. So that's why my final thought is if you're a Syracuse fan, you better take cover right now, considering that next opponent in UNC, the third-ranked team in the country, the best team in the ACC. We already hit on it. They averaged the most points in the ACC, hovering around 83. They dropped 103 in that meeting earlier in the season against Chapel Hill. And when you barely beat a Louisville team, when you lose to BC, lose to Clemson over the last week or so, you're not gonna do well against North Carolina, especially with those defensive issues as of late. I expect a massive performance from Armando Bacot in North Carolina to absolutely dominate in the paint. Let's just say I'm not too optimistic about Syracuse as I sum things up.
You know that Boston College loss still stings a little bit. 6 years without a loss, right? Yeah. And then they dropped that one, and now they got to go on this stretch where they play Clemson and UNC. It has been really tough for the Orange as of late.
Well, I mean, there's still a chance, right? You guys are not even like glass half full people. You kind of just knock the glass off the table and look at it on the ground, maybe like spit on the water that's spilled. There's a chance. There's a chance. But unfortunately, that's all for us on our very first hour-long Orange Press Pass from Sam Reis, Adam Avin, and Philip Galati, making some Citrus TV history. Thank you to everybody behind the scenes that made this broadcast possible. See ya.